Welcome back, fellow Grand Strategists, for another edition of Imperator Academy. It's been quite a while since I uploaded a video, not because I didn't want to, but it's just simply due to lack of time. Anyway, in one of my previous videos on military matters, I opted to neglect naval warfare, thinking that this subject deserves a video of its own. Well, that time has come, and in this edition, we will go through all the aspects of naval warfare, ranging from naval compositions, unit types, naval actions, and much more. First of all, just like armies, navies have their own distinct unit types. To see this, all you need to do is click over in the military tab and scroll down to the ship section. It will open up an interface just like it did with the army section, but this time for ships. As you can see, there are 6 types of naval units in the game, the weakest being the Lembos and the strongest the Mega Polyremes. Each type of ship is more effective than the ship above it, at the cost of less movement speed and manoeuvre, but keep in mind more maintenance. For example, if I was to scroll my mouse cursor over the name of the triremes, we would see that they do more damage to the ship above it, the Liburnians, and they do less damage to the ship below them, which would mean the Tetras, the Hexes, the Oxes, and the Megapolyremes. They have 12 movement speed and 3 manoeuvre, which means they can move quite quickly across sea tiles, and the 3 manoeuvre allows a trireme to hit 3 units simultaneously on the flanks. The same applies to the other ships. If I was to scroll down to the Hexes here, you will see that they do more damage to the ships above them, which are the Tetras, the Triremes and the Lembos, but less damage to the ships below it, which is the Octes and the Megapolyremes. What tends to happen is, the heavier the ship, the more damage it does, but the less movement speed it will actually have and the less manoeuvre it has. You can see that the Megapolyremes are the heaviest of the lot. They do a lot of extra damage to all the other types of ships, but they have less movement speed, with the 7 movement speed, which makes them pretty slow, and they have no manoeuvre, which means on the flanks they're pretty useless. You've got to remember that as you go down each ship category, so the heavier it gets and the more damage it makes and the less movement speed and manoeuvre it has, the more gold the ships will cost to produce and to maintain. To see this, just click on any given territory with the port and the resources needed to build a ship. Click on Build Ships, and here you'll see the cost of the ships on the left and the maintenance cost on the right. As you can see, as the ships get heavier, the more they cost. So the Lembos being the cheapest, they cost 5 gold to produce, but they are the lightest, they move quicker, have more flanking ability, but do less damage, but they cost less to recruit. Their maintenance is also very low at 0.10 per month. The lower I go down and the heavier the ship, the more it costs. So the Megapolyrean, being the heaviest type, costs 28 gold to recruit and 0.67 to maintain. So it's up to you to balance if you have the money to maintain heavy ships or not. It really depends on your economy. On a side note, some ship types also do and receive more or less damage. For example, Megapolyremes do 40% more strength damage and receive 30% less morale damage. You can see this by looking at the ships that have these bonuses under their names represented by a horn and a strong arm. So I'll show you here, just move your mouse cursor down here to the Megapolyremes, and under you'll see a horn with minus 30% and an arm with plus 40%. The horn with the minus 30% represents it takes 30% less morale damage in combat, and the plus 40% strong arm increases it does 40% more strength damage when in combat. If I go over to the Octes here, you see it has a minus 20% with the horn next to it. They take 20% less morale damage. The same applies to Hexes here. They take 10% less morale damage and do 10% extra strength damage. The Triremes have minus 10% morale damage taken, and the Lembos, however, they do plus 15% morale damage. Just like armies, navies also have a set of modifiers located at the top of the ship section in the military tab. As you can see, they have base morale, they have ship damage done, they have ship damage taken, ship capture chance, and blockade efficiency. These can all be increased in various ways through resources, inventions, and so forth. The morale of navies being the amount of time they can actually last in combat, so the higher the morale, the longer they can stay and fight. The ship damage done is pretty self-explanatory, increases the ship damage done in combat. The ship damage taken, pretty simple as well, it's like the amount of damage you take extra or less in combat. The ship capture chance, it just increases the chance you have of capturing enemy ships after a combat and adding them to your fleet. And the blockade efficiency increases the efficiency of maintaining the blockade. So if I were to place a navy outside of a port sea tile with a fort, and if my army was sieging it down, then the siege would go a lot quicker. Just to give you guys an example of resources that increase ship damage, I'll just click on my city of Massalia here, click on the import, and I'll scroll down to the hemp here, and you can see having a surplus of hemp in the capital increases ship damage by 10%. So if I were to import hemp into the capital and have a surplus, then you would see over here, if I go into the military tab here, ships, the ship damage done would increase by plus 10% due to the fact that I have a surplus of hemp in the capital. It's also worth noting that there are sub-modifiers for each category of ship which can be increased through inventions. Every ship type has a modifier that can be applied to their offensive, discipline, movement speed, defensive, morale and maintenance costs. The offensive determining how much extra damage they do in combat, discipline increases how organised your units are, doing a multiplier to all damage done and received in combat, movement speed increasing how quick your navies move, or your Liburnians, sorry, here in this case would move across the map. The defensive would be a reduction to all damage received, morale determining how much more morale they have, meaning that these types of ships can stay longer in combat, and maintenance costs reducing the cost monthly gold sum to actually maintain them. Anyway, now that we've gone through the different unit types and different modifiers that can be applied, how do we get ships? Well, first of all, to build ships you need to either produce or import the resource needed to build them, that resource being wood. The next thing you will need is a territory adjacent to a sea tile, and that territory has to have a port. To see if a territory has a port, just look for the lighthouse icon on the world map. Here, as you can see in Massalia here, there's a lighthouse, which means it has a port. The neighbouring territory of Turention also has a lighthouse icon there, which means it has a port. Another example would be Rode down here. It also has a lighthouse icon, which means it has a port. Once you have all these conditions united, all you need to do is to build them is go to the macro builder here, click on the macro builder, go on to build ships, and then you can just click on any type of ship you want to build and it will show you the locations where you can build it. Or you can actually just basically click on any given territory that has a port that you own, and with the wood of course needed to build the ships, click on build ships and you can just build them from there. However, it's very important to note that the heaviest ships, so the Octiers and the Mega Polyremes, require specific military traditions to build. All you need to do to see if your nation can actually build them is just go into your military section here and click on the show traditions and try and find the tradition in here that allows you to build the types of ships. Not all nations can do it, but since I'm playing as a Greek tradition here, I can see that on the right side here, proud shipwrights allow me to build the Octier units, and the mine is bigger than yours allows me to build the Polyreme units. I find the mine is bigger than yours tradition to be absolutely hilarious. I'll let you guys figure out why it is. I think it goes well with the type of ship that you can actually build. Well, now all this gibberish on ship types and how to build them is finished, let's dive right into naval combat and see how it works with the navies. Well, to be honest, it is pretty much just like land battles, and to show you this, I'm going to go and find my navy and show you. So I'll click on this first Nauticon here. As with armies, at the top left here you have your admiral, so he is the one assigned commanding the fleet. This dude is just like the general of land battles. The higher the marshal's admiral stat, the better chance you have of rolling a favourable dice roll. If you want to see what all this nonsense about dice roll stuff is, just go and check out the military guide where I explain in detail the complexities of a fight. Basically what happens is you roll a dice at every battle phase, and then if you roll a better number than your adversary, then you do more damage. It's something like that, but go and check out the military guide if you want to actually have that in detail. Also, look out for any specific character traits in a general that can increase the speed of your navies and the damage your navy does to try and give you an edge in battle. Just like the army, navies are divided into three cohorts, so primary cohorts, secondary cohorts and flanking cohorts. The primary cohorts are the ships that engage the enemy first, and once the enemy primary cohorts have fled and been destroyed, the secondary cohort comes in, takes over and engages the enemy, and finally the flanking units hit the enemy from the side. Remember, for flanking to work, you need more ships than the enemy, and the higher the manoeuvre of the flanking units, the more enemy ships you will hit. On a quick side note, you can see the health of each individual ship on the far right side of the banner, the maximum being at 100%. Here it is, you can see it here, the 94% is the health of my first Octier, the Pasavi, and the maximum being 100. If your ship's health is below 100%, then all you need to do is to dock in one of your ports and the ship will repair over time. Another similarity with land warfare is the ability to select tactics. I'm not going to go over this in too much detail here since the concept is the same as in land battles, so if you want to find that out also just go and check out that military guide I did a little while back. Basically you have 5 tactics to choose from, and depending on the composition of your navies, certain tactics will be more efficient than others. To see the different tactics, just click on the tactic icon to the far right of the screen at the top here when you select your navy, and will open up the tactics tab. Here, as you can see, my navy is highly efficient in the harassment tactic here. As with army tactics, each naval tactic is efficient against one tactic and deficient against another type. For example, a navy with the frontal assault tactic at the top here would deal an extra 15% damage to an enemy navy using the harass tactic. However, if it would come up against a navy using the close ranks tactic, then my navy using the frontal assault tactic would deal 10% less damage to that enemy fleet. You also have 2 extra tactics to choose from next to the tactic icon, and these are the round buttons here. You have boarding tactics and ramming tactics. Basically, boarding tactics increases enemy ship capture chance by 10%, but reduces the damage done by 10%. The last one over here, the ramming tactic, increases ship damage dealt by 10%, albeit increasing their damage received by 10%, so it's up to you to choose which one you want. Ships are not only used for directly fighting other navies at sea, they also have a few nifty little tricks that you can use. The first one I wanted to talk about is a personal favourite, and it's that of slave raiding. The button is located here, the slave raid option, and this is really cool because it allows you at the cost of some aggressive expansion to capture other nations' pops from a port territory and transfer those pops as slaves to your capital. This technique can only be used when your navy is adjacent to another nation's port, and in order to use this you need the victor's spoils military tradition, and not every culture group has this. As you can see, if I go into the military section here and go in my show traditions, you can see I have the victor's spoils tradition activated here and bought, which enables me to slave raid. This is a brilliant technique if you're playing tall, because it enables you to fill up your small nation with slave pops, which you can then promote to freemen or citizens, increasing manpower and money. Fleets can also capture ports, and this icon is located up here on the top right. This allows you to take control of a port territory that does not have a fort, and it will allow you to occupy that land. You can also enact a port raid option, which is just below here, and this allows you to basically create a breach in a siege on a port territory that has a fort, thus accelerating the siege process. And finally, if you have mega polyremes, you can do the port assault. This reduces the fort level of a port territory that has a fort by 1. So, for example, if someone were to use the port raid ability on my capital Massalia over here, as you can see the fort level is at 1, it would reduce that fort level by 1. Considering that it's 1 fort level per fort and that my capital Massalia only has 1 fort level, my fort would be destroyed, paving the way for an enemy occupation. But let's thank the gods that the AI is not smart enough to do that yet. Remember, to do the port assault you need mega polyremes. Well, now is probably the time that you guys are asking yourselves, what navy composition should I have? Well, like armies, this is open to interpretation. However, in my experience, I like to have 2 fleets that do 2 distinct jobs. To show you what I mean, I'm just going to open the military tab here and go down into the ship section to show you the different types of naval units. The first fleet I would like to have is what I call a light fleet, which is made up of the first 3 types of ships, so the Lembos, the Trirear and the Tetriers. These are all light ships, and this fleet is mainly used as a transport fleet due to their high movement speed, which enables me to quickly ferry armies to the different theatres of war and evade enemy fleets, since they're quicker than the other heavy ships. If they do, however, engage in a combat, I make sure that the primary cohorts are the Trirears, this being that they are pretty much the sacrificial lambs here. The ships, they try to deal as much damage as they can before the secondary cohorts take over. In this case, it's the Tetriers, and these do a bit more damage to the previous types of ships, so the Trirears and the Lembos. On the flanks, I like to put Liburnians, the Lembos here, because they have a high flanking ability, so they have 4 manoeuvre, which allows them to pretty much hit 4 units from the flanks. The second type of fleet I like to have, and this is the main fleet, it's the heavy fleet. These are comprised of the heavy hitters that do most of the naval engagement. This fleet is made up of the heavy ships, so the Megapolyremes, the Octirs and the Hexirs. they deal incredible damage. They may be slow moving, I mean they have less movement speed than the 3 light ships above, and they may be more expensive to maintain, so you need to make sure you have the gold to actually build them and maintain them, but once they catch up with you, oh by god, they do loads of damage and there's pretty much no escape. This fleet is also used for blockades, and if a fleet is stationed outside a port with a fort, the siege speed will increase, it will enable to do raids and so forth. As the primary cohort, I use Octiers. They're the ones that engage first here. They take less morale damage, which means they can last longer in a fight, and my hope is that they can just take out as much as the enemy ships as possible. Once their job is done, that's when the mega hitters come in, the mega polyremes down here, and they just do tremendous amount of damage, and they take less morale damage, and they should just mop up what's left. On the flanks, I like to use the Hexiers because they have a little bit of manoeuvre, so they can hit one ship from the flank, so one Hexier can hit one unit on the flank. It's not much, but it's still something, and I always like to have a little bit of a flank. Finally, before I end this episode, I want to put out an improvement that I think should be made to improve the Navy system. People may not agree with me, and that's fine, but what I think is that there should be a separate manpower pool for the Navy, just like they have in EU4 with sailors. This would make navies more precious and strategic, limiting the number of ships you can have depending on your amount of sailors. If you don't have enough coastal provinces, then obviously you don't have the same amount of sailors as a guy who has a lot of coastal provinces. This also means that if you lose a fleet, it would be incredibly costly, needing you to rebuild your fleet from your sailor manpower in order to rebuild it. In its current state, losing a fleet just feels like it has no consequence, and that if you have the cash to rebuild it, well, you can just rebuild the fleet relatively quickly. Anyway, that's about it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope it helped you guys master naval warfare. I also want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for their support. I recently hit 500 subs and it is massive. I mean, I never imagined I would get to that number, and it may seem small, but to me it actually means a lot, and you guys are just brilliant, you're amazing, you're the best. So thanks for the comments, the subs, the support, everything. I can't stress how much it means. Anyway, as per usual, thank you so much for tuning in, guys, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time for another episode of Imperator Academy. Later, people.